Hello, this is Queen Mother Dr. Dòwòti Désir. I was recently asked by the Embassy of the Benin Republic to the United States to share a translation of the new laws conferring citizenship to Afro-descendants who are interested in repatriating to Benin Republic. I'm going to be reading this to you, and I'm going to do it in 3 parts because there are several chapters, one that concerns the general provisions, another that speaks to the terms and conditions of the recognition. The 3rd chapter speaks to the effects of citizenship by recognition, and the final chapter speaks to provisions. So let me just make it clear that the National Assembly had conducted deliberations over the summer, right? And some of you may have seen videos that I have put out that speaks to this. And the President of the Republic has enacted the law as set out below. Chapter 1, General Provisions. Section 1. The purpose of this act is to define the specific terms and conditions under which the people recognized as Afro-descendants may be granted citizenship, Beninese citizenship by recognition. Section 2. Section 2. Under this act, an Afro-descendant is any person who, according to their genealogy, has a sub-Saharan African ancestor deported outside the continent as part of the slave trade and triangular trade. Okay. Chapter 3, the terms and conditions of the recognition. Any Afro-descendant who so requests may obtain Beninese citizenship by recognition, provided that they meet the following conditions. 1. You must be at least 18 years old. 2. You have to be a national of a non-African state or territory. 3. You must be able to provide evidence establishing their ancestry. Right? Section 4. The petitioner shall provide proof of Afro-descendants by means of an official document. Any testimonials established by an acknowledged instrument or any technical or scientific means, such as a DNA test performed by an organization recognized by the Republic of Benin. Section 5. The people of sub-Saharan African descent born prior to 1944 and the states and territories of deportation as part of the triangular trade are deemed to be Afro-descendants under this law. Section 6. Evidence of African descent may be provided by the determination of parentage with a person recognized as an Afro-descendant. Chapter 7. Any petition for Beninese citizenship by recognition shall be addressed to the Minister of Justice by the petitioner himself or herself when physically present on the territory of the Beninese Republic. The Beninese citizenship by recognition shall be granted by the decree of the Council of Ministers upon proposals by the Minister of Justice. I'm going to stop here for a minute, and we're just about halfway through Section 2, Chapter 2, that speaks to the terms and conditions of recognition, because I just want to go over a few of these concerns. Again, this law is to define the very specific terms and conditions by which people are recognized as Afro-descendant. And again, how the Beninese government recognizes you as an African descendant. The very first thing that it does is says that any person who, according to their genealogy, came from sub-Sahara Africa. Now, what do we mean by sub-Saharan Africa? Let's take a look at the African continent. It's a massive continent. And when we look at the upper portion of the continent, the one that looks most like the top of a skull, the Saharan desert ranges from the most western part of the continent all the way east. Generally, the countries that border the southern part of the Sahara Desert are known as sub-Saharan African countries. Now, let me say, sub-Sahara usually refers to those of us who are even more richly pigmented, those of us who are even darker, and those of us who identify as black, as opposed to Arabia or Islamic cultural people. So that's one way of understanding sub-Sahara. The other thing is that it relates to the linguistic groups that we speak or that we're a part of, various types of ethnicity. It's a number of factors. But just getting back to this, one of the things that the law speaks to is the triangular slave trade. The slave trade in the Afro-Atlantic slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade in captive Africans. So if you have an ancestor who was deported outside of the African continent, specifically through that process, then you are considered a sub-Saharan African, right? Now, in order to obtain citizenship, there are three things that you have to be able to meet. First of all, you've got to be of age. You've got to be of age. You have to be at least 18 years old. You cannot be the citizen of an African country on the continent, okay? You have to be the national of an African nation, African peoples, a member of sub-Saharan African Diaspora. Again, you can be in Europe, you can be in North America, you can be in the Caribbean, you can be in Central America, you can be in South America. For that matter, there are also Africans who are in Asia as well. We don't want to forget our brothers there, our sisters there. But for the purposes of this law, they're really speaking about what has been historically known as the transatlantic slave trade. The third thing that you have to do is to be able to establish ancestry that comes from this place. Now, the easiest thing that most people talk about and know of and is cited in Section 4 of this law, Chapter 2, is through DNA. Through DNA, that's evidence of you being of you having sub-Saharan ancestry. But I should think other factors come into play, and this is something that we need to get more information from. Information such as oral histories. You have a descendant whom you know came from Dahomey, for instance, who came from any number of sub-Saharan African countries. So if you have that oral history, that may be something that can be shared. And then there's a third thing that I've wondered about, which we need clarity on. Because it too is a system of thought, and it is a system that is formally recognized, and that has to do with Ifa, with the Fa, with divination that speaks to the ancestry of an individual. And so how those two processes would work in terms of either supporting DNA or serving and acting independently of that is something that I'd like to have a further conversation with the ambassador or the cultural attaché at the embassy about, and hope to organize a public forum where that could happen. Now, something interesting that is brought up here is in Section 5 with regard to anyone who was born, sub-Saharan person who was born prior to 1944 in any of the deported states or territories are considered Afro-descendants under the law. That means that our elders, these would be people who are in their 80s, their 90s, and those who have been blessed to live longer than that, those people are automatically considered African descendants. Section 7. So, if in fact one is seeking Beninese citizenship by recognition, then these documents, this information, this petition that you will make has to be done at the Ministry of Justice. Well, that is if you do that physically, that is you fly to Benin, or maybe you're already on the continent and you drive over there. But it would be through the Ministry of Justice that you would physically make this petition when you're in Benin. And once the petition is deposited to the Ministry of Justice, it would be reviewed by the Council of Ministers. So the Council of Ministers is the one who actually will grant the decree. And this would come, again, through the Minister of Justice. We're going to stop for now, and we will continue with Section 8. Complete that chapter, which I believe is Chapter 2, and then we'll look at Chapters 3 and 4, the effects of the citizenship by recognition, and the final provisions. Thank you for your time and attention.